Before you vote whether or not to annex the Philippines, think about what you value as an American. What have we fought for as a country? Think about how we sympathized with the Cubans during their revolution against Spain. We fought with them against Spain's tyranny. We were appalled at the way the Cubans were treated. We looked on in horror as they were mercilessly thrown into concentration camps and murdered by General Weyler, who we nicknamed the Butcher. Here today we face the possible annexation of the Philippines. Should the United States colonize the Philippines? No, we should not. Doing so would be quite a hypocritical move on our part. Our own Declaration of Independence would be a hypocrisy. Our ideas of equality would be questioned, and the Filipinos would surely revolt against us as we are becoming comparable to Spain. Pro-imperialists insist that we should educate the Filipinos, that they are incapable of self-government. How are we to make this claim? There is more than a hint of racism in that argument. Yet haven't we already abolished inequality here for all men? 5 long years were fought in the Civil War against slavery. We are going backwards as a nation if we forget our own history. We must not forget Lincoln's words. No man is good enough to govern another man without that other's consent. We are indeed turning our back on his words. They do not want tyranny. We are completely aware that they had just been fighting for their independence against Spain. In fact, we helped them. We would certainly be governing them without their consent, and they would not care to be educated by us. If our purpose of annexing the Philippines is to educate the Filipinos, they would learn American history and understand the depth of our hypocrisy. We would proudly teach them of our great achievements as a nation. We would show them what America stands for. Most importantly, we would emphasize our value of freedom. How would the Filipinos react to this? According to William Jennings Bryan, the Filipinos would mock us for our inconsistency. He is right, because they would see how we fought for our own independence as a nation. They would ask themselves, how is it justified that America should deny us of our independence? Hatred for Americans would build and spread quickly, and there is nothing we could say to justify our rule over them. After all, we are not any less brutally violent than Spain, so we are not doing the Filipinos a favor by saving them from their former tyrant. We would simply be replacing one tyranny for another. Lincoln states that when a white man governs himself and also governs another man, that is more than self-government. That is rule by a tyrant. That being true, America is by definition of Abraham Lincoln a tyranny. Despite when people say, America isn't any nicer than Spain, the Anti-Imperialist League states that the annexation would be the extension of American sovereignty by Spanish methods. We certainly have Spanish methods of imperialism. We are not being a peaceful people at all. We are betraying them and fighting against them with our U.S. forces. America is becoming a tyrant over the Philippines, strikingly similar to the way Spain had been a tyrant over both Cuba and the Philippines, which, ironically, we had fought against. They would have just as much reason to revolt against us, and they would do so immediately. America should not annex the Philippines because it would go against our own values. We would be seen as hypocrites to any nation familiar with our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. Do we want to be seen as evil tyrants, no less horrible than the ruthless Spanish tyrants? Do we want the whole world to see that we don't really mean what we say? America is becoming a selfish, inconsistent nation. It is a mockery of its own morals. If this annexation happens, America will never be taken seriously.